Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And today we have Leah with us because Stephanie can't be with us today, but she'll be back with us soon enough. Don't worry about that. So, Leah, what exactly are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're looking for a quiet place, so I think we're going to see if we can find one.
Indeed, and we're going to find out there are some quiet places here in Taiwan that have been listed by this man who's trying to make the world a quieter place. This is our environment unit for the month of December, and indeed, it can be quite noisy if you live in the city. I think most of our listeners are city residents.
I would say probably it's hard to get away from a city in Taiwan, so I would imagine most folks are city residents.
Of course, we're trying to figure out some places that we can go to that are very quiet, and that's what our lesson is about today. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson now one time.
Take a few moments to sit and listen. Concentrate on nothing except what's entering your ears. What can you hear? Perhaps a passing scooter or the incessant wail of an ambulance siren. Maybe you notice your air conditioner's fan or the sound of a ringing phone. The chances are you can't hear silence. According to Gordon Hempton, that's a problem. Hempton is an acoustic ecologist who has spent much of the last 41 years circling the globe in search of Earth's natural soundscapes. While Hempton is interested in capturing a range of sounds, the sound he's most concerned about is the most endangered of all sounds, quiet. Hempton regards the loss of quiet as an alarming issue, but it's one that is invariably not taken seriously. Instead, people ignore it in favor of combating the loss of animal habitat, endangered species, and toxic pollution. Part of the problem is that noise pollution is elusive. We can see trash on the ground, and we can smell when the air is contaminated. Noise, on the other hand, is much less tangible, so people don't regard it as equivalent. There is also evidence to show that excessive noise pollution actually harms our health. The World Health Organization found a correlation between extended exposure to noise pollution and an increase in strokes, heart attacks, depression, and more. Likewise, the Royal Society's Biology Letters Journal published a report that states that noise pollution is threatening more than 100 animal species. It's no coincidence that the healthiest ecosystems in the world tend to be the quietest. Hempton believes that if we were to start treating noise pollution as what it is, pollution, then the world would soon become a much healthier place.
Okay, everybody, let's get to it. Let's discuss the contents of today's lesson. Here's the title, How One Man is Making the World a Quieter Place. Be careful with this title because we've got the word how there, and that does not mean that this is a question. You might ask the question, well, how is one man making the world a quieter place? That could be a question because you have the be verb closer to the beginning, and then this would be the answer. Well, I'll tell you, or we will tell you, how one man is making the world a quieter place.
If we take a look at the first sentence, I really like it because you're being bossed around. Take a few moments to sit and listen. So they're telling you take a few moments to sit and listen. This is a command. It's followed by the second sentence of concentrate on nothing except what's entering your ears. So you start out and you're told to relax, get into a space, and listen to what's going on around you. And you're being commanded to do this. And the sentence starts with a verb, which is quite unique. Both of the sentences start with a verb, which is quite unique. But there is an understood you in front of that. So you take a few moments to sit and listen.
Right. Take a few moments. Sit down. Make yourself comfortable. Those are examples of commands that begin with verbs. And indeed, try to concentrate on silence, basically, or at least enter on what's focus on what's entering your ears. What can you hear? This question is not really fair for you and I, Leah, because we're in a recording studio right now, and the only thing we can hear is each other's voices. But for most people, maybe they hear other things like traffic or birds or whatever.
Yeah, and in a studio, if you hear something else, you're probably not going to want to keep recording because it's going to be a messy space then for sound. What you want is quiet, like we want here in our story. Some things that can make noise, as are mentioned here, might be a passing scooter. Now here, passing scooter is a scooter that is going by, so it is passing you, and you're hearing it because it's making noise as it's passing, or it's passing outside your window of your apartment or something like that. Another thing that you might hear is the incessant or non-stopping, not stopping wail, so scream of an ambulance siren.
Exactly. So I think the sound of a passing scooter is probably the most common sound here in Taiwan. I don't think you can go anywhere without hearing that within 5 or 10 minutes, unless you go climb some of the tall mountains or something. But yeah, where I live, we hear scooters passing all the time. And then sometimes, of course, because we live near a hospital, you might hear a passing ambulance. And an ambulance has a siren. That's the sound that ambulances make. Woo, 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 woo. Something like that. Police cars make those sounds too. And we're describing that sound as being a wail, which is a high-pitched sound that someone might make if they're in pain. I heard the wail of a dog that just got hit by a car, for example.
And another noise you might hear might be when you would notice your air conditioner's fan or the sound of a ringing phone. Well, if you notice something, it means you become aware of it. Suddenly you go, oh, I didn't know that was going on before. I just noticed that. So sometimes you don't notice that your air-conditioned fan is going, but it is creating noise that when you notice it, you hear.
Or you might hear the sound of a ringing phone, a landline telephone, or maybe your cell phone is making some noises. And the chances are you can't hear silence. At least where I live, yes, it's very difficult to have total silence. There's always going to be some kind of noise, a dog barking, a scooter passing, or even the sound of the light-vented bulb or the common myna or whatever. They're making noises all the time.
The thing is that I find interesting with this sentence is that you can actually hear silence because silence means there's no sound going on. And if you can hear silence, it's almost kind of a paradox there. According to Gordon Hempton, that's a problem. Well, when you listen to this man, to Gordon Hempton, and what he has to say, according to him, from what he says, this is a problem. It's not good that we cannot hear silence around us.
Yeah, I guess it's a good thing to hear silence once in a while. I can't really stay in a really quiet room for too long because I have tinnitus a little bit, so I will hear that. So I guess my days of hearing total silence are long over, but who is Hempton? He is an acoustic ecologist who has spent much of the last 41 years circling the globe in search of the Earth's natural soundscapes.
There are some fun words in that sentence.
There certainly are. First of all, we've got the word acoustic here. That kind of means having to do with sound or the sense of hearing, or building a recording studio or something like that. You have to have a knowledge of acoustics.
A lot of times if you go to a orchestra performance or band performance, it sounds really good in the place that you go to in the music hall because of the acoustics. It's the way the sound will move around the room. The way they have set up the room to make it sound good is focusing on acoustics. And an ecologist is someone who studies the way organisms relate and intermingle and interact in their environment.
And they study ecology. And again, he's studying the science of sound. And again, he's traveled the world. He's circled the globe over the past 40 years, or at least much of the last 41 years. He's been traveling around the world. And he's been looking for these natural soundscapes. Soundscape's kind of an interesting word here. It just considers sound and music all together, how it sounds in an environment.
Right, and if you think of another word that has scape behind it, that would be landscape. So you talk about the landscape of an area, the way the land looks around you. So the soundscape is the way the sound sounds around you.
That's kind of a new word for us here, soundscape. That's related to landscape, as you said. So let's move on now to the next paragraph and see what it says. It says, while Hampton is interested in capturing a range of sounds, the sound he's most concerned about is the most endangered of all sounds, quiet. So here we got while, or it is true that he is interested in recording lots of sounds, but even though that's true, he's still mostly concerned about quiet, and we're describing that as the most endangered of all sounds. We usually see the word endangered when we talk about certain animals that are about to go extinct. Yes, that particular rhinoceros, for example, is endangered. It might go extinct soon.
Which is, it's kind of an interesting word when you look at it because endangered, it sounds like it's in danger. And in a way, it is. It's in danger of not being around anymore. So quiet is in danger of not being around anymore. Hampton regards the loss of quiet as an alarming issue, but it's one that is invariably not taken seriously. So he regards it as, he sees it as. If you regard something, you look at it. So if you are regarding something as, he personally views it as, sees it as, he feels that it is a serious issue. So the loss of quiet is an alarming issue. That means, oh, it's a terrible thing. It's a very scary and frightening thing. It's alarming.
Yep, it's invariably not taken seriously. It's always not taken seriously. Nobody really thinks about it too much.
So without variation, right?
Yeah, without variation, right. Unavoidably, it's just something that people don't think about too much. And I think that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是12月份 Unit7 How One Man is Making the World a Quieter Place 第一天的课程。嘘，我们现在保持3秒钟安静。请问大家听到了安静的声音吗？这篇文章探索的是如何找回环境中原有的宁静。我们现在一起来看看学习重点。好，第一段，请同学看到第2句。Concentrate on nothing except what's entering your ears. 好，这个 nothing except 请同学画起来。其实它的意思就是 only, OK? 就是请大家只专注在进入你耳朵的。那再来，请同学看到第8个句子哦。第8个句子 Hampton 这个句子 Hampton is an acoustic ecologist 是声音生态学家。那他做了什么事呢？他在过去41年 circling the globe in search of， 由于他是在 span 这个动词之后，那所以我们加 ing， 他呢在地球各个地方做什么 in search of， 他一直在寻找呢地球上自然的声景。接下来请同学看到这个 Soundscapes， 它其实是相较于眼睛所见的 landscape 就是地景地貌的意思。请同学看到第2段，好，第2个句子 Hampton regards the loss of quiet as an alarming issue。 这个 an alarming issue 请同学呢特别注意， alarming 意思是指 worrying or disturbing， 就是堪忧的。比方说 Our countryside is disappearing at an alarming rate， 就是我们的乡下这些安静的场景安静的地方都快速的消失，很令人堪忧。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, let's continue with our lesson. We're talking about Mr. Hempton here, Gordon Hempton, and he's looking for silence. Again, he's an acoustic ecologist, and he thinks that quiet is endangered. It's getting more and more difficult to find quiet places in the world because humans just love to make a lot of noise. So again, he regards the loss of quiet as an alarming issue, and it's invariably not taken seriously. So instead, people ignore it in favor of combating the loss of animal habitat, endangered species, and toxic pollution, among other problems. So yes, indeed, they don't really take him seriously. Noise pollution, is that really a problem? We've got other things that seem to be more important.
And if you don't take something seriously, oftentimes you do something instead. So you're doing something else. So people instead are ignoring the problem of there not being the silence. And instead, they're focusing on combating the loss of the animal habitat. Now, of course, that's a very important thing to focus on. And in terms of the fact that if you lose an animal habitat, the animals in that habitat are very likely to not have a place to go to. They might end up in a zoo, or they might die out and become endangered themselves. And so they are in favor of combating it. Combating, this word is combat, is a really fun word because if you say it as a noun, it's combat. But when it's a verb, it's combat. The accent goes on the second syllable, and that means to fight something. So they're fighting the loss of the animal habitat or endangered species, and they're also focusing on toxic pollution. I love this word toxic. It's very popular in day-to-day life these days. People will talk about toxic relationships, or they will talk about their friends being very toxic when they say a lot of mean and cutting things. However, that's not what they're talking about here with toxic.
Yeah, it means poisonous, basically. It's something that harms the environment. So yes, we're talking about air pollution or water pollution and stuff like that. Those are toxic. They're harmful to the environment. And part of the problem is that noise pollution is elusive. If something's elusive, it's kind of hard to capture, it's hard to catch, and you can't really see it or feel it. Like pollution, air pollution, you can see that. Water pollution, you can see the chemicals being dumped into rivers. But noise pollution, it's kind of hard to figure out what it is, and you can't really put your finger on it.
And that's in comparison to other things, because we can see trash on the ground, and we can smell when the air is contaminated. Or, when it has a problem with the air, you can smell that something in the air is dirty. Not always, but a lot of the times you can. Noise, on the other hand, is much less tangible, so people don't regard it as equivalent. If something is not tangible, then it's not touchable. You can't hold it in your hands. So it goes back to it being elusive. It's hard to get a grasp on.
Exactly. So indeed, it's not something that you can see or feel. So people don't really pay it much attention. They don't regard it as equivalent. And here, equivalent means something of equal value. I remember going to university and they had courses that were required. They said, you need to take Math 101 or the equivalent. You need to take you need to take a course that is basically the same thing as this one so that you can take other classes later on.
There is also evidence to show that excessive noise pollution actually harms our health. For example, if you go to a rock and roll concert and the noise is really loud at that concert, you're going to go home and your ears are going to be ringing. Over time, if you go to a lot of concerts, you might end up suffering from a poor hearing. You start to lose your hearing, and that's because there is excessive noise in that environment. Here, when we're talking about excessive noise pollution, excessive means more than what is necessary. So if you exceed what you need, then really what you have is excessive. So you can have you might have an excessive use of your phone. Most people do. They sit there and they spend a lot of time on their phone and they use their phones excessively.
Right. Excessive is an adjective here, and it can harm our health. So let's talk about an expert here. The World Health Organization, or the WHO, has found a correlation between extended exposure to noise pollution and an increase in strokes, heart attacks, depression, and more. So again, we've got this organization that takes a look at health around the world, and they have found a connection, a correlation, a relationship between extended exposure to noise pollution and various health problems. So a correlation, of course, is a link, a connection, a relationship, and they find a relationship there. Yes, if you are exposed to excessive noise pollution, you might have some health problems.
Right, and here when they mention extended exposure, so extended means a long time. It's not just, one minute in a day. That's not an extended period of time. But if you have a lot of noise pollution in your environment around you, every day for 8 or 9 hours of the day, that's an extended exposure. And exposure, if you think about some things that you use exposure in, you're talking about sun exposure. If you go out in the sun too long in a day, then you have an excessive amount of sun exposure, and you're probably going to get a sunburn in that situation.
And extended here is basically the same thing as excessive. So you're going to have excessive exposure to noise pollution or extended exposure to noise pollution. I think extended here refers more to the time that you're exposed to the noise pollution. And there is a correlation there. There is a relationship between noise and an increase in strokes, which is 中风 in Chinese, heart attacks, depression, and other various maladies.
Likewise, the Royal Society's Biology Letters Journal published a report that states that noise pollution is threatening more than 100 animal species. So this journal wrote a report, or published a report, printed a report, that says that noise pollution is really causing problems for a lot of animal species out there, more than 100 of them. So that lets us know just how serious noise pollution is. And most people don't think about noise pollution as being a serious problem.
Yeah, I think I've heard somewhere that explosions in the ocean or something are causing problems for humpback whales and other species in the oceans. So, noise can have an effect on animals and humans as well. So this is something we should pay attention to. And now let's move on to the final paragraph and wrap things up. It says, it's no coincidence that the healthiest ecosystems in the world tend to be the quietest. So there's no coincidence there. There is a relationship between quiet and having a healthy ecosystem. So ecosystem here is related to ecology. It just refers to the environment and how all these things interact with each other.
And we finish up with Hempton believes that if we were to start treating noise pollution as what it is, pollution, then the world would soon become a much healthier place. So we need to get a handle on the pollution that we are dealing with, not just air pollution or, water pollution. We really also need to be considering noise pollution.
Indeed, it's something we need to take seriously. And yes, indeed, we should try to find some quiet locations to hang out once in a while. And turn off all the sounds. Don't listen to the traffic. Don't listen to music and things like that. And just kind of chill out and be quiet for a while. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now one more time to our Chinese teacher.
好，我们继续看第二段第3个句子。Instead, people ignore it in favor of. 请同学把这个 it 画起来 ，it 所指的是第二句的 the loss of quiet 宁静的丧失。再请同学看到后面的 in favor of 这个片语也请画起来，这个是偏好、支持的意思。也就是说，很多人呢会对这个噪音的问题有所忽视，而比较偏好或者支持其他的环保议题。接下来请看第4句的最后一个字 elusive， 这个字是difficult to find, catch or achieve， 也就是难以捉摸的意思。再来请同学看到第6个句子 noise on the other hand， 好，请特别注意到 on the other hand 来做前后句的文意连接，因为呢 很多人会重视这种地面上的垃圾问题啊，或者空气污染问题，而相形之下相反的，对于这个噪音，很多人就会觉得说噪音并不是那么具体，所以 much less tangible 就是具体，因为噪音看不到，只是听得到，所以很多人呢就没有把噪音当作一回事。They don't regard it as equivalent. Equivalent 指的当然就是前面的这一些垃圾问题或者空气污染问题的对等。Equivalent 就是相等的、对等的东西。好，再来请同学看到第3段的第2个句子。The WHO found a correlation between extended exposure 这个句子。好，请同学把 extended 画起来。这里 extended 意思是指长时间的暴露 extended exposure。再来请同学看到第4段。第4段的这个句子，在第2句。这第2句呢，有一个非常重要的句型哦。Hampton believes that if we were to start treating noise pollution as what it is， 请同学把这个 if we were to 画起来，再接着往下看。Then the world would soon become a much healthier place。请同学把这个 the world would 也画起来。这里老师要跟大家说，这其实是假设语气。为什么呢？因为前面说到很多人对噪音污染并不重视，那所以如果我们开始重视了 if we were to， 我们并不用 if we are to， 因为我们知道说 be 动词 to 再加原形表示未来式。如果我们开始注意，那由于呢作者觉得大家都那么不重视，所以可能性比较低，所以我们用这种未来的对于未来的假设语气，等于是说大家会开始注重的可能性还是相对比较低的，因为这个议题没有受到那么多的重视。再来呢，后面 the world would soon become 也是等于是和由于大家并不是很重视嘛，所以将来能够变成比较健康的环境，机会当然就比较小，所以一样呢，我们是用would 而不是用 will。 好，这是假设语气，请同学特别注意。以上就是我们第1天课程的中文讲解，谢谢大家。
That's all for today, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and make sure you join us again next time when we continue to talk about Gordon Hempton's quest to find quiet places in the world. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
And I'm Leah.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.